Welcome to Outside Views. Today we continue our series BRITURN, the Obstacles. And this is Chapter 16, Taxation. As we examine the possibility of the UK joining the European Union again, it's essential to remember that this would not be a simple reversal of Brexit. The UK would need to apply as a new candidate and undergo the rigorous EU accession process, adhering to all the requirements for membership. And today's focus is on Chapter 16 of the Acquis Communautaire, that's the taxation policy. But before diving into the specifics of taxation policy, it's crucial to understand the fundamental prerequisites for joining the EU. The so-called Copenhagen criteria define the basic conditions that every applicant country must meet before the accession talks can even begin. And these criteria include political stability with democratic governance and human rights protections, a functioning market economy capable of handling the pressures of EU competition, and the ability to adopt and implement the full body of EU law, known as the Acquis Communautaire. And this means that joining the EU again is not a negotiation in the way many people understand the term. It is a process of fulfilling strict requirements set by the EU. And rather than a back and forth discussion, it's about the UK proving that it can comply with all EU regulations and obligations. Each chapter of negotiation is therefore not about bargaining, but about demonstrating readiness for integration. The EU's taxation policy covers two main areas. That's indirect taxation, which includes value-added tax or VAT, and excise duties, and direct taxation, which involves corporate and personal income taxes. The purpose of EU tax policy is to ensure the smooth functioning of the internal market by eliminating tax obstacles to trade and competition, while also preventing harmful tax practices. The UK would need to fully align its tax regulations with EU standards to meet the requirements of this chapter. One of the most significant aspects of EU tax policy is VAT harmonization. The EU's VAT system is designed to ensure consistency across member states, reducing distortions in competition and simplifying cross-border trade. Before Brexit, the UK operated within the EU VAT framework, applying common rules on rates, exemptions, and reporting requirements. Since leaving, the UK has had more flexibility in setting VAT policies, but this has also created new trade barriers. If the UK were to join the EU again, it would need to fully comply with the EU's VAT directives, which dictate minimum rates and exemptions. And this would require adjustments to the UK's VAT system, ensuring alignment with EU-wide regulations and the ability to integrate into the EU's VAT Information Exchange System, or VIS, which facilitates cross-border tax compliance. And excise duties are another critical area of EU taxation policy. The EU mandates minimum excise duties on products such as alcohol, tobacco, and energy products to ensure fair competition and discourage harmful consumption. Currently, the UK has its own excise duty rates, which differ from EU standards. Joining the EU again would require the UK to adjust its excise duty framework, aligning rates with EU directives and ensuring proper collection mechanisms. It would also mean rejoining the Excise Movement and Control System, or EMCS, which monitors the movement of excise goods across the EU to prevent tax fraud. Direct taxation, while largely under national control, is also subject to certain EU principles. The EU requires that tax policies do not create unfair competition or discriminatory practices between member states. The UK would need to comply with EU directives on corporate taxation, including rules on the taxation of savings income, anti-tax avoidance measures, and the exchange of tax information between authorities. This would mean aligning corporate tax rules with the EU's Code of Conduct for Business Taxation, which aims to eliminate harmful tax practices that distort competition. A significant part of EU tax policy is administrative cooperation and the fight against tax evasion and avoidance. The EU has established several mechanisms for member states to exchange tax-related information, ensuring transparency and compliance. The UK would need to reintegrate into the EU's mutual assistance frameworks, including the Directive on Administrative Cooperation, or DAC, which mandates the automatic exchange of financial information. This would mean re-establishing real-time data sharing agreements with EU tax authorities, enhancing cooperation to combat tax fraud and evasion. One of the major challenges for the UK in aligning with EU tax policy is its status as an international financial hub. The UK has historically been a major center for global finance, attracting multinational corporations with competitive tax policies. The EU has taken significant steps to curb tax avoidance by multinational companies, introducing measures such as the Anti-Tax Avoidance Directives, or ATAD, and the Base Erosion and Profit Shifting, or BEPS framework. Joining the EU again would require the UK to implement these rules fully, limiting the ability of multinational corporations to shift profits to low tax jurisdictions. And this could have significant implications for the UK's financial services sector and corporate tax revenues. The digital economy is another area of increasing importance in EU taxation policy. The EU has been working towards a harmonized approach to taxing digital services, ensuring that large tech companies pay fair taxes where they generate profits. The UK has implemented its own digital services tax, or DST, but this is not fully aligned with EU proposals. Joining the EU again would likely mean adopting the EU's digital tax framework, requiring changes to how the UK taxes digital businesses. Another challenge for the UK would be ensuring compliance with EU rules on state aid and tax incentives. The EU strictly regulates state aid, ensuring that tax breaks and incentives do not distort competition within the internal market. The UK has used tax incentives to attract investment, including schemes for research and development and free ports offering tax advantages. Joining the EU again would mean submitting these schemes to EU scrutiny, ensuring they do not violate state aid rules. This could require modifications to existing tax policies and investment incentives. Reintegrating into the EU taxation framework would also mean reconnecting with the broader EU economic governance mechanisms. The EU closely monitors member states' tax policies as part of the European semester, assessing their impact on economic stability and growth. The UK would need to participate in this process, ensuring its tax policies align with broader EU economic objectives and fiscal discipline measures. So in conclusion, Chapter 16, Taxation, highlights the complexities of reintegrating into the EU's tax framework, especially when taxation was one of the Brexit reasons in the end. While alignment with EU tax rules would facilitate trade, enhance cooperation and reduce tax avoidance, it also would require significant adjustments in VAT policy, in corporate taxation, excise duties, and tax enforcement mechanisms. For the UK, this chapter is not just about technical compliance. It's about ensuring a fair, transparent, and competitive tax system that aligns with EU standards and contributes to the stability of the internal market. Joining the EU again would mean fully embracing these obligations, ensuring that tax policies support economic integration and prevent distortions within the European framework. And this concludes our discussion on Chapter 16, Taxation. In the next episode, we will of course explore the next challenge in the accession process and examine how the UK might navigate these complexities on the path to a possible new EU membership. Thank you for watching Outside Views, and see you next time. The next video is already right here in the end screen.